Bom dia! Welcome back. Welcome back to paradise. Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. Porto de Barra. I once had a love-hate relationship with this 2-block stretch of beach and small neighborhood. The period I'm referring to occurred 15 to 20 years ago. A long time ago now, but they definitely left a mark. The Brazilian musician and composer Tom Jobim once said in a famous quote, "Brazil is not for beginners." And I would add, that is doubly true for the city of Salvador. And where I really learned that lesson was in the Porto de Barra neighborhood, the neighborhood we just walked through with that small crescent-shaped beach. What was it, or what is it, that makes the Porto de Barra neighborhood here in Salvador so seductive and also, what word shall I use? A bit dangerous, risky, addictive? What is it that makes Porto de Barra so seductive? Well, I think first of all, it's its natural setting. It's a small, crescent-shaped beach that faces the Bay of All Saints. Years ago, it was voted by the Guardian newspaper as one of the 10 most beautiful urban beaches in the world. And it is also famous because for its sunset. Generally in Brazil, of course, because Brazil faces the South Atlantic Ocean, the sun sets behind you. It sets inland, but because of the geographical position of the peninsula that Salvador sits on, the Porto de Barra beach, the sun sets in front of you. So hundreds of people gather on that beach in the late afternoon to watch the sunset, and they give the sunset a big round of applause. It's a very charming scene. Porto de Barra has many charms. One thing is that it's like the whole city funnels down into the Porto de Barra. Geographically, the city sits above the Porto, and the streets lead down into the Porto de Barra neighborhood. So you have people from all over the city of Salvador coming down into the Porto de Barra. So you've got an eclectic mix of soteropolitanos, people from Salvador, who hang out in Porto de Barra, combined with interesting collection of foreigners who visit or live here in Salvador. And it takes a certain eccentric, interesting kind of foreigner to choose Salvador as a place to live, including me. But in addition to its charm and beauty, Porto also has a dark side. It's easy to fall into excess, into bad habits, and in with the wrong crowd in Porto de Barra. And if you're not streetwise, let this truck go by. If you're not streetwise to Salvador and Porto de Barra's ways, if you're naive or somewhat innocent, as I was in those early years here in Salvador, you can get overwhelmed. I remember once a Dutch man told me that it's like you have a lot of people in Porto de Barra who are barely hanging on, and they will see you as a life raft, and they will try to climb onto your life raft. He was speaking symbolically, of course. They will try to climb onto your life raft and at one point, at some point, you'll have so many people trying to cling to your life raft that you start going under too. And I thought that was an apt metaphor or description of the reality of Porto de Bahia. In my first years here in Salvador, living in Porto de Bahia, were like heaven. I thought I was in heaven, and in some ways I was. Days were spent sitting on the beach there in Porto, and evenings sitting in small sidewalk bars and cafes, laughing, oh my God, so much laughing and talking and learning. And it was the most brilliant way to perfect my street Portuguese, because many of these people that I was hanging out with were street people. It was a fascinating real life class in living like a soteropolitano. Soteropolitano is a native of Salvador. And there was also always lots of drama, gossip, interesting characters, both local and foreign, coming in and out of the stream of people living in and passing through Salvador. I found it endlessly fascinating. In those days, I was not a permanent resident as I am now, so I would stay every single year the maximum amount of time that I was allowed to on a tourist visa, which was 6 months, and then I would have to leave Brazil for 6 months, and I remember I'd count the days on the calendar until I could come back for another 6 months here in Salvador. That was my reality for a number of years. We're talking from about, well, starting in the year 2000 up to the year 2011. The first 2 years were in the city of Sao Paulo. The third year was in Rio de Janeiro, and the years subsequent to that were all here in Salvador. And I lived for those 6 months. And the other 6 months, I'd go back to San Francisco, and then I'd go to Mexico, which was another one of my loves. But nothing compared to Salvador, at least for me. But by the year 2010, what had once been nirvana had started to reveal a darker side. I suppose because by that time I was very fluent in street Portuguese, Brazilian street Portuguese, and in the ways of some of the people I was hanging out with. A British friend of mine said to me, "Do you realize that all of our friends, all of the people that we're hanging out with, are either murderers, thieves, or prostitutes?" I'll never forget that line. I laughed so hard, and it was so true. Now, neither she nor I set out to collect such a group of friends, but it just happened. And you know, they were for the most part good, nice people, friendly people, entertaining, warm, not in the least bit threatening at all. But there were some dark sides. Now, I have never mixed with drugs, but there was a lot of drug use going on in the form of, there was an epidemic of pedra, which I think is crack, and that started to darken the scene. And people who were light and friendly started to have an edge to them that was no longer pleasant. And I started learning things that I hadn't realized in my naivete. And what had been a joyous experience really started to turn dark for me. And finally, in 2011, I had reached to the point where, like my Dutch friend had said, I was finding myself drowning, being pulled under. And so I left and I stayed away from Salvador for 4.5 years. Yep, there was a 4.5 year stretch there where I did not return to Salvador, and I even thought, well, maybe I never would return, but the pull was always there. I never lost my love for Salvador, and I did come back, obviously. I believe it was in 2015 or 2016. I came back older and wiser and did not make the same mistakes that I had made before. And look at me, I'm still here today, 22 years after my very first visit to Salvador. I am a legal permanent resident, and as you all know, I love it here. But I do not hang out in Porto de Bahia. I walk through it, as I walked through it this morning. I don't avoid it, but I don't linger there. Many, or I would say most of the characters that I knew back then are gone now, but a few are still around, and they're always saying, come on, come to the beach, hang out here at the beach in Porto, and I always decline because it's too full of memories for me. Now, Bahia is a big neighborhood. I do hang out in Bahia, at the beach in Bahia, but not Porto de Bahia. You can roughly divide Bahia into two sides. The Porto side and the lighthouse side. And I think you've seen that big lighthouse in many of my videos. I hang out on the lighthouse side, the Farol de Bahia beach. Can you believe it, amigos? Here I am back at this crafts and plant fair for the third time this week. But you know, when you're love plants and you love clay pots to put them in, then this is just irresistible. And I'm not sure, this is not a permanent fair, so I'm taking advantage. And it's a good walk up here. I think it's about a 45-minute walk up here, uphill, and then another 45 minutes downhill, so it's good for my daily walk, in addition to supplying my plant addiction. I'm absolutely not buying a plant today. I have no more room for plants, but I did buy a clay pot to put a plant in because, as I've said, I hate plastic pots that new plants come in, so I always transfer them into clay pots. Okay, heading back down the hill, back to my neighborhood. Okay, I just wanted to give you some background on my history here in Salvador. You know, I am so happy that I never gave up on Salvador back in those, during that somewhat dark period around 2011, 2012. I never gave up on Salvador, and I'm so glad that I've made my life here permanently. I suppose it would have been easy just to have given up on Salvador and created a new reality for myself somewhere else in the world, but I didn't give up. And Salvador has proven to be my spot in the world. Thank you, Salvador, and thank you, Brazil. And thank you, Iemanjá. Okay, well, I'm home now, and I repotted that plant, took it out of the plastic pot, and put it into my new clay pot that I bought today. And here's that wall planter I bought. What was it, 3 days ago? I made a few changes, added a Hindu deity onto it, a little owl. Here's Kitty Cat taking a nap. I'm having an afternoon cup of coffee, and I've got some books to read, and I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, beijo, ciao.